There are moments in music that you can feel before they actually happen, like a storm building on the horizon. You don't see the lightning yet, but you feel the pressure drop. The air gets heavy. Something shifts. Something you can't name tells you that the world is about to change. That is exactly where we are sitting right now with Kendrick Lamar. And if you think that's dramatic, if you think that's hype talk or fan energy running wild, then you clearly have not been paying attention to what has been quietly assembling behind the curtain over these last few weeks. Because what just happened, the piece of information that just dropped, the signal that just came through from one of the most important names in Kendrick Lamar's entire creative universe, is not just another clue. It is not just another rumor circulating on the timeline. This is the kind of confirmation that changes the entire picture. This is the kind of thing that makes you realize the countdown has already started and nobody told the people who needed to hear it the most. So buckle in, because what we are about to break down is going to hit different. And if you are not subscribed already, do that right now, because when this drops, you are going to want to have been here from the beginning. Let's set the scene properly, because context matters enormously here. For the past several months, there has been a very specific energy building around Kendrick Lamar's next chapter. Not the loud, attention-grabbing energy that social media lives for. Not the kind of noise that Drake's camp manufactures through carefully timed leaks, dinner conversations with media personalities, and calculator sheet streaming metrics designed to look like cultural dominance. This has been something quieter. Something more disciplined. The kind of movement that only becomes visible once you know what you are actually looking at. And that movement has been accelerating in a way that is impossible to ignore now. Industry insiders who have been accurate all year long, not once, not twice, but consistently with receipts, started reporting weeks ago that Kendrick Lamar's next album is not just in progress. It is not in an early creative phase. It is finished. Or as close to finished as something this carefully constructed ever gets before it is released into the world. We are talking about final stages. Final polish. The kind of position where an artist stops building and starts deciding. And that information alone should have shifted every conversation in hip-hop. But then something else happened. And this is the part where everything gets significantly more real. You have to understand the weight that the word finished carries when it is attached to Kendrick Lamar specifically. Because for most artists in the modern streaming landscape, finished just means the tracks are recorded and the features are cleared. For Kendrick, finished is a completely different standard. This is an artist who spent years on To Pimp a Butterfly, reconstructing the sonic architecture of that record until it was exactly what his vision demanded. This is the artist who went back into Damn and made decisions about sequencing and tone and narrative that most people in hip-hop would not even think to make, because they simply do not operate at that level of intentionality. So when someone with inside access to this process says the album is in its final stages, that is not a casual report. That is a declaration that something extraordinary has been completed. And the combination of that report landing alongside a very specific signal from inside the creative circle, well, that is when a brewing storm becomes something you genuinely need to run toward or away from, depending on which side of Kendrick Lamar's vision you are standing on right now. A producer posted 3 words on the internet. 3 words that on their own, from almost anyone else, would mean absolutely nothing. Let's get it. That's all it said. 3 words on a Friday afternoon, May 22nd, right in the window when the Kendrick album report was already tearing through social media and turning every hip-hop timeline into speculation central. But here is why those 3 words matter. Here is why they carry a weight that is completely disproportionate to their length. The man who posted them is Deetsz. And if you do not know that name immediately, let me tell you exactly why you need to, because this is not a peripheral figure. This is not a session musician or a background collaborator who popped up once on a deep cut and happened to know Kendrick. Deetsz is one of the most consistent creative forces operating inside the PG Lang universe. He has built records with Kendrick Lamar. He has built records with Baby Keem. His fingerprints are on a body of work that represents some of the most critically important music either of those artists has put out. This is someone who is so closely embedded in that creative ecosystem that calling him an in-house producer for PG Lang would not be an exaggeration. It would be accurate. And this is a man who does not just come out and say things. He does not perform for the timeline. When he posts, it means something specific. When he speaks, it is with intention. He does not break that pattern for nothing. If you go through his online presence and look at what he has shared historically, there is a very specific behavioral pattern. He shares his work. He shares the accomplishments and the records he has built with Kendrick and Baby Keem. He lets the music speak, and when he steps forward to say something, he lets the record speak for him. Family Ties. Gloria. Baby Keem's self-titled. These are not small entries on a production resume. These are some of the most important records in that entire creative universe, and Deetsz built them. So the behavioral baseline here matters. A man who only ever lets his work do the talking does not suddenly step forward to post a message to the timeline for no reason. He does not break that pattern over a vague industry rumor or because the energy on social media feels exciting. When that kind of producer breaks that kind of pattern at that kind of moment, you stop and you pay very close attention. Because the only reason that behavior changes is if the moment is big enough to demand it. And the moment that is apparently building right now is more than big enough. So when a producer of his stature, with his access, with his proximity to everything Kendrick Lamar is currently building, breaks his own behavioral pattern and comes out with those words right as the album report is dominating the conversation, you have to understand what that means. You have to understand the statement being made without a statement being made. Because this is how Kendrick Lamar's world operates. Everything is intentional. Everything is timed. Nothing is random. And the people around Kendrick know that better than anyone. They do not freelance with information. They do not give away things carelessly. If Deetsz posted those words at that specific moment, there is a reason for it. And that reason connects directly to the most important unreleased record in hip-hop right now. Now let's talk about the record. Because if you want to understand why all of this is so much bigger than just another album announcement cycle, you need to understand what this particular song represents and what its existence means inside the larger architecture of Kendrick Lamar's career. We're talking about the track that has come to be known by many names, Bodies, Tiramisu, the record that has been teased, glimpsed, and withheld in a way that has never quite happened before in this genre. Deetsz produced this song. That is his creation. That is his contribution to the most anticipated, unreleased record in rap. And so when you stack his Let's Get It on top of the Industry Insider report that the album is entering its final phase, you are not looking at coincidence. You are looking at a confirmed signal from the man whose hands literally built the song that everyone believes is going to be the key that unlocks Kendrick's next era. Think about the trajectory of this record for a moment, because the way it has been deployed is something we have genuinely never seen before in hip-hop. The first time the world heard it, or rather heard pieces of it, was in the trailer for GNX. That album trailer dropped and something hit. There was a fragment of music underneath it that carried a different kind of gravity. And then GNX dropped and that fragment was not on it. The song was held back. Whether that was always the plan, or whether it became the plan, it was kept in reserve. Then comes the Super Bowl. The single biggest stage in live music on planet Earth. The halftime show that every artist dreams about, and that Kendrick turned into a cultural event unlike anything that stage had produced in years. And what opened it? What was the sonic flag planted in the ground before Kendrick walked out in front of 100 million viewers? That record. That same fragment of music. Played again. Unfinished. Teased again. And then, again not released. Pulled back. Held. The statement was made, and then retracted. Twice. On two of the biggest stages in Kendrick Lamar's entire career. And that is not an accident. That is not an oversight. That is a pattern with intentions so deep behind it that even when you see it clearly, you're still only seeing part of what it means. And then the tour. The Grand National Tour, which became the defining live music moment of 2025 in hip-hop. The biggest touring event the genre had seen, with Kendrick playing stadiums and delivering performances that people are still talking about. And Bodies was in the set. He performed it, or began to perform it, at MetLife Stadium on the first night. It was there, transitioning in that specific way into N95, carrying that electric energy into one of his most iconic records. But then on the second night, something changed. The song was gone from the setlist. And in its place, something appeared on that stage that had not been there the night before. A massive GNX prop. A car, draped in a red tarp, placed on that stage as if it were marking territory, as if it were a statement. The song removed. The symbol added. And from that point forward, Bodies did not appear again throughout the rest of the tour. That is not a setlist adjustment. That is not a performer getting tired of a particular sequence. That is choreography at a level that most artists could not even conceive of. Kendrick Lamar took that song off the stage and replaced it with a cymbal. And if you know how Kendrick thinks, you understand immediately that the song was being saved. It was being positioned. It was being loaded like a weapon that only gets used when the timing is exactly right. And we saw that same red GNX symbol again in the Luther music video. So now you have a thread running through a trailer, a halftime show, a stadium tour, a music video, and now, an insider report about an album in its final stages paired with 3 words from the producer who made the most important unreleased record in this entire story. There are levels to what Kendrick Lamar is constructing here. There are layers that most people have not even begun to peel back. And the fact that this is already the conversation, the fact that we are already in an investigative, analytical, emotionally invested discussion about the meaning and architecture of music that has not even been released yet, tells you everything you need to know about the distance between what Kendrick Lamar represents and what his competition represents. Because let's go there for a second. Let's talk about the contrast, because it is important, and it is real, and it makes everything about this moment hit harder when you see it clearly. While all of this has been building, while Kendrick has been quietly constructing what appears to be one of the most carefully designed album rollouts in modern hip-hop history, the opposition has been doing what it always does. Drake has been running the same playbook that he reaches for every single time Kendrick Lamar's name starts trending. The streaming numbers conversation. The fake numbers narrative. The dinner invitations to media figures who are happy to carry water and validate a position that does not hold up under scrutiny. The academic-style analysis of chart positions that somehow never accounts for the fact that cultural relevance and metric performance are not the same thing, and have not been the same thing for a long time now. There is a reason Drake's supporters keep returning to numbers. There is a reason the entire defense of his position relies on spreadsheets instead of conversations about what the music actually means and what it actually does to people. It is because when you remove the numbers, the argument collapses. When you sit in a room and actually engage with the art, what it communicates, what it challenges, what it reveals about the world and the people living in it, there is no competition. And Drake knows that. Deep down, behind the narrative management and the media strategy and the carefully crafted public persona, Drake knows exactly what Kendrick Lamar represents. He knows what happened in the summer of 2024. He knows what July meant. And if the signs are reading correctly right now, he is about to find out what this July means too. What makes this dynamic so fascinating to observe from the outside is how transparent the mechanics of it are. The people who have aligned themselves against Kendrick right now are operating from a position of borrowed time, and they do not even fully realize it. The Iceman energy, the Jarvis record throwing shots with the confidence of someone who believes the target is no longer a threat, the media personalities who were recently taken to dinner and are now amplifying every possible angle that positions Kendrick as somehow diminished or finished. All of this is built on a single assumption. The assumption that because Kendrick went quiet after GNX, he is gone. That the run is over. That the cultural moment passed. And the catastrophic flaw in that assumption is that it confuses Kendrick's silence with defeat, when in reality, Kendrick's silence has always been productive. It has always been intentional. It has always been the period between the question and the answer has always been bigger than anyone expected. Every single time. Without exception. So the people who built their entire current position on the idea that Kendrick Lamar's silence was surrender are not just going to be wrong, they are going to be devastatingly, publicly, inescapably wrong. And the more confidently they have held that position, the harder the fall is going to be when this drops. If you have been riding with this channel and following this story, you already know the trajectory. You already know how methodically Kendrick moves and how every piece connects to something larger. And if this is newer to you, just think about the sequence we have laid out here and ask yourself, does any part of this look like coincidence? An industry source with a perfect track record on everything from Baby Keem's album to Kendrick's movements reports that the new album is entering its final phase. Within 24 to 48 hours, the producer, who built the most significant unreleased track in Kendrick's arsenal, posts 3 words that break his usual pattern. The same producer whose work is woven into the GNX trailer, the Super Bowl entrance, the stadium tour. The same record that keeps appearing at Kendrick's most pivotal moments and then vanishing before the world can fully hold it. This is not a coincidence. This is not fan speculation running away from reality. This is a convergence. And convergences like this in Kendrick Lamar's career have historically preceded moments that alter the landscape of hip-hop permanently. Think about what he has already done. Think about the sheer scale of where we are right now because of decisions Kendrick Lamar made at specific moments when he could have stayed quiet, could have let things pass, could have taken the easier and safer route. He did not. He chose the harder path every single time because he knew what was waiting on the other side of it. And each time he did, the result was not just a win for him personally. It was a marker, a before and after point. A moment that hip-hop historians will reference for decades because the cultural weight of it was simply too enormous to be forgotten or minimized. And if the signals we are reading right now are accurate, and there is genuinely strong reason to believe they are, the next marker is being set. The next line in the sand is being drawn. And when it comes, the conversation that follows is going to make everything that has happened since GNX look like the opening paragraph of a much longer story. Now here is where it gets genuinely fascinating from an artistic standpoint, and this is the part that separates this conversation from anything you will hear in Drake's corner of the internet. The question of why. Not whether the album is coming. At this point, the evidence for that is overwhelming and stacking faster than any counter-narrative can absorb. But why this specific architecture? Why hold bodies back across the trailer, the Super Bowl, the stadium tour, only to seemingly be positioning it now as what many believe will be Heart Part 7. Why travel that long with a piece of music, giving it just enough presence to make it unforgettable without ever giving the world enough to fully grasp it? This is not conventional artist behavior. This is not the way album rollouts work in the streaming era where every artist is sprinting to release because attention spans are short and the algorithm punishes delay. Kendrick is doing the opposite of that. He is building anticipation the old way, the way that requires trust in your own vision and complete confidence that when the moment arrives, the audience will be there and the impact will be proportional to the wait. And based on everything we know about how Kendrick operates, that confidence is earned. Every time. If Bodies is the Heart Part 7, and the evidence for this interpretation is genuinely compelling, then what we are witnessing is Kendrick using a single piece of music as a thread that runs through multiple chapters of his career simultaneously. The Heart series has always been more than just a collection of tracks. It has functioned as Kendrick's ongoing conversation with himself, with the game, with the culture at large. Each installment has carried a specific weight and arrived at a specific moment in his evolution. If this is the next installment, it arrives at the most consequential moment of his career to date. After the biggest beef in modern hip-hop history. After the most-watched halftime show in a generation. After a stadium tour that broke records and redefined what live hip-hop performance means. The Heart Part 7 landing in this context, after all of that, with all of that weight behind it, would be one of the most significant moments the genre has produced. And then, the album that follows, it would be operating from a position of cultural gravity that almost nothing in hip-hop has ever been launched from. Let's also not overlook something that happened during the Grand National Tour that I think got buried under the volume of everything else going on, but deserves a much closer look. Kendrick was playing those stadiums at the absolute peak of his visibility. Post-Drake beef. Post-Not Like Us. Post-Super Bowl. The entire world was watching every move he made on that stage. And in that environment, with a global audience, with the media microscope at full zoom, he made a deliberate choice to remove a song from his setlist and install a physical symbol in its place. That is not a small decision. That is a statement. That is Kendrick communicating something to the audience about the relationship between a song that has not been released and a visual symbol that is connected to a music video that exists and an album that exists and a larger creative universe that he is still actively building. He was telling anyone paying close enough attention that the story was not finished, that the song had somewhere else to be, that the timing was not yet right. And now, months later, with everything aligning the way it is aligning, the timing may finally be approaching. There is something almost cinematic about the way this has unfolded. If you zoom out far enough to see the full picture, from the GNX trailer to the Super Bowl to the tour to the Luther visual to the insider reports to Deetsz posting those 3 words, It reads like a story that was plotted in advance. Like chapters of a book where each one ends with just enough unresolved tension to pull you into the next one. And the chapter we appear to be entering now is the one where the answers start arriving, where the music that has been held in reserve finally enters the world, where the album that Kendrick has been building in disciplined silence finally breaks that silence in the most impactful way possible. And when it does, when that moment comes, the conversation in hip-hop is going to reach a register that it has not been at in a long time. Right now, if you are enjoying this breakdown and this investigation into everything Kendrick is building, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button and drop a like on this video. Because this is just the beginning of what is going to be one of the wildest stretches in hip-hop in years, and you do not want to miss a single piece of it. Every signal, every move, every drop, we are going to be here breaking it down with the depth it deserves. Subscribe now and stay in the conversation because what comes next is going to require everyone paying attention. Back to the bigger picture here. Because there is something happening on the other side of this story that deserves to be addressed head-on, because it is part of why the stakes of Kendrick's return are as elevated as they are. While Kendrick has been building quietly, with discipline, with architectural precision, the opposition has not been idle. Drake and the machine around him have been running their version of a campaign. Iceman Energy. Narrative Management. The Jarvis record, which is climbing the charts and throwing shots at Kendrick from a position of, let's be honest, someone who is trying to plant a flag before the opposition arrives to remove it. The academic community that has aligned itself against Kendrick continuing to amplify every possible metric that supports their preferred story and quietly ignoring the ones that do not. And the thing about that approach, the thing that makes it both predictable and ultimately doomed, is that it works perfectly right up until the moment when Kendrick actually shows up. And then it stops working completely. Because there is no calculator defense against the kind of impact Kendrick Lamar generates when he is operating at full capability with a clear mission and a fully realized vision. There is no streaming chart conversation that can survive the cultural earthquake of a perfectly deployed Kendrick Lamar project landing exactly where it was aimed. And Kendrick knows this. He knows it not because he is arrogant or because he is dismissing the competition. He knows it because he has been watching. He has been studying. He has been understanding exactly who he is dealing with and exactly how they operate and exactly where the cracks in their foundation are. And when you have that level of knowledge about your opponent, when you have studied them more carefully than they have studied you, you do not need to rush. You do not need to panic. You do not need to respond to every provocation or validate every narrative attempt. You just need to be ready. And based on everything the evidence is telling us right now, Kendrick is ready. Isaiah Rashad gave us a small but significant glimpse into Kendrick's internal world recently when he talked about a conversation he had with him. What came through in that account was the portrait of an artist who is ruthlessly honest with himself about his creative process, who holds himself to standards that most people in the industry would find paralyzing, who approaches his work with a level of intentionality and critical thinking that goes well beyond what the average MC brings to a project. This is not an artist who releases music because the schedule says it is time, or because his team has identified a market window. This is an artist who releases music when the music is ready and when the moment is aligned and when the vision is complete. And that discipline, that refusal to compromise the work for the sake of speed or convenience, is exactly why what he releases lands the way it lands. It is exactly why a single record from Kendrick Lamar can shift the entire conversation in hip-hop in a way that a full album from most other artists simply cannot. So when the Insider Report says the album is in its final stages, not conceptual stages, not early recording stages, but final stages, and when Deetsz posts those 3 words in the immediate wake of that report, what you are reading is a confirmation that the discipline has run its course and the vision has been completed to the standard Kendrick requires. The work is done. The timing is being chosen. And the moment is approaching. And that is not a small statement. That is enormous. Because Kendrick Lamar finishing an album in this specific cultural moment, after everything 2024 brought, with everything 2025 built, heading into the summer of 2026 with all the energy that is swirling right now, means that when this project lands, it will land with more context and more weight and more accumulated meaning than perhaps anything Kendrick Lamar has ever released. Including including To Pimp a Butterfly, including Good Kid, Mad City, because all of those albums arrived at important moments in his career. But none of them arrived with this particular combination of circumstances. None of them arrived with the world already watching at this specific frequency. Think about what it means to release an album after winning one of the most watched beef events in hip-hop history, headlining the Super Bowl halftime show, completing the biggest hip-hop stadium tour in recent memory, and doing all of this while continuing to be the subject of an opposing narrative that has done everything in its power to minimize, distort, and undermine your position. Think about releasing into that environment with a project that was built during all of it, that absorbed all of it, that processed all of it and transformed it into something that can be played out loud and listened to and felt. That is not just a music release. That is a document. That is a statement of record. And depending on what Bodies or the Heart Part 7 or whatever it ultimately becomes represents thematically, depending on what Kendrick has poured into the version of this song that the world is finally going to hear in full, it could be the most important single piece of music he has released since Control, since The Heart Part 5, since Not Like Us. And that is saying something extraordinary. Here is what we know for certain right now. Kendrick Lamar is operating in a mode of focused, intentional, disciplined creation. The album is in its final phase according to sources that have proven their accuracy all year long. The producer of the most significant unreleased record in Kendrick's current creative period has broken his established pattern to put energy out into the world at exactly the right moment. Every visual and sonic clue that Kendrick has left across the last year, from the GNX trailer to the Super Bowl to the tour to the music videos, traces a thread back to the same song and the same creative moment that appears to be finally arriving. And the opposition, for all its noise and all its calculator math and all its dinner table media relationships, has no actual answer for what is coming. They have built their current position on the assumption that Kendrick Lamar staying quiet meant Kendrick Lamar being finished. They have confused discipline with absence. They have confused patience with defeat. And they are about to find out exactly how wrong that reading was. What Kendrick is doing right now is not just making an album. What he is doing is completing a chapter that began before GNX, and that has been building through everything GNX generated. He is closing a loop that was opened in a trailer that played a song that never officially released. He is answering a question that has been sitting unanswered at the center of hip-hop's most compelling narrative for the better part of 2 years. And he is doing it on his timeline, at his pace, in the manner that his vision demands. Because that is who Kendrick Lamar is. That is the artist that hip-hop produced when all of its greatest influences converged in one place at one time and created something that did not just represent the genre, but elevated it. Something that did not just participate in the conversation, but directed it. Something that, every time it produces work, reminds the entire industry of what this music can actually be when it is taken seriously and treated with the respect and craft that it deserves. And here's the thought I keep returning to, the one that makes all of this feel bigger than just an album rollout or a beef update or a competitive landscape shift. What Kendrick Lamar is building right now, this next project, this next chapter, this next statement, has the potential to be a generational marker. Not just for his career, for the art form. Because there are very few moments in hip-hop's history where an artist arrives at the intersection of massive cultural visibility, a fully developed artistic vision, a perfectly right moment in the culture, and the discipline to have waited long enough that the release carries maximum weight. We are watching one of those moments assemble itself in real time. We are watching the pieces come together in real time. And the beautiful, uncomfortable, electricity in the air feeling of being here right now while it happens, not knowing exactly when but knowing it is close, not knowing the full picture but seeing enough of it to understand its scale, that is a feeling that people who love this music are going to remember. So here is where we land. Deetsz said 3 words. Those 3 words came from the producer of the most important unreleased song in hip-hop right now, at exactly the moment when the report of a finished Kendrick Lamar album was spreading through every platform. The signal is loud. The signal is clear. And the people on the wrong side of this are still trying to convince themselves and each other that the math works out in their favor, still building arguments from numbers while Kendrick is building art that makes numbers irrelevant. Still trying to manufacture a moment while Kendrick is quietly finishing the real one. still thinking that because the king has been quiet, the king has been weakened. They have been wrong about this before. Badly wrong. And the correction that is coming is going to be proportionally larger because of how confidently wrong they have allowed themselves to be. Kendrick Lamar is almost here. The evidence is stacked. The signals are converging. The producer, who built the key to this next era, has spoken. And whenever that first piece of music arrives, whether it is the record that gets named Heart Part 7 or something else entirely, whether it arrives tomorrow or 3 weeks from now, when it lands, everything changes. The conversation shifts. The culture moves. And every person who spent this waiting period dismissing the incoming with spreadsheets and speculation is going to have to reckon with the fact that they were looking at a clock and did not understand that it was already ticking. So, watch the timeline. Pay attention to the signals. And stay ready. Because the summer of 2026 is about to become something that hip-hop will not stop talking about for a very long time. And that is the thing about Kendrick Lamar that no opposition strategy has ever successfully accounted for. His returns are never just returns. They are recalibrations. Every time he comes back into the conversation with a fully realized body of work, the calibration points for what hip-hop measures itself against shift upward. The bar moves. And everyone else has to decide whether they can clear it or whether they're going to keep arguing that the bar should not have been moved. Kendrick does not argue about bars. He clears them and then sets them somewhere higher. And this time, with everything that has been building, with everything that is now aligning with the producer who built the most important record in this story coming out with those 3 words at exactly the right moment, this time, the bar is going somewhere that nobody on the opposition side is even looking at yet. If you made it to this point in the video, you are exactly the kind of person who deserves to be here for what comes next, and what comes next is going to be absolutely massive. Drop a like on this video if you are ready for this, because that matters more than you know when it comes to making sure this content reaches the people who actually care about the music and the meaning behind it. And subscribe right now, not because I am asking you to, but because you know as well as I do that when Kendrick drops, you want to be in the space where the conversation is happening at the deepest level. We are going to be here for every piece of it. Every signal, every drop, every revelation. This is the channel where hip-hop is taken seriously. And the next chapter of that conversation is closer than anyone outside of Kendrick's inner circle realizes. Stay locked in. Because whenever it begins, and it is beginning very, very soon, you will not want to have missed the moment the warning came through. The warning is here now. The rest is just waiting for the world to catch up.